Today, we're jumping into a legal case that really gets you thinking. It asks a pretty fundamental question. Can a marriage actually survive a lie? We're going to look at a story where a secret from the past didn't just cause problems. It literally put the entire definition of marriage on trial. Seriously, just think about that for a second. You meet someone, you connect, you build a life together, you get married, and then bam, you find out something about them. Something so big it makes you question everything you thought you knew. Well, this isn't just some movie plot. It's exactly what happened in a huge Indian court case back in 1982. So, let's meet our central figures, Srimati Kiran Bala Asthana and Bhaire Prasad Srivastava. They were two adults who consented to get married, but their union was blown apart almost right away. Why? Because the husband stumbled upon a massive secret that his new wife's family had gone to great lengths to hide. So, how did this all unfold? Well, it started out pretty simply. Bhaire Prasad was drawn to Kiran Bala, and, he didn't really do a deep background check or anything. They got married, but soon after, the bombshell dropped. He found out that her first marriage had been legally erased, annulled, on the grounds that she was of unsound mind. That discovery led him straight to court to end their marriage, and that's where the real battle began. You see, this case wasn't just about one couple's problems. It opened up this huge legal and even philosophical debate. Is a Hindu marriage a sacred, unbreakable vow that goes beyond any human lie, or is it more like a contract where you absolutely need honest, informed consent for it to be legit? The entire outcome hinged on answering that very question. So the court was basically staring at two completely different ideas of what marriage is. On one side, you have the view of marriage as a contract, and with any contract, consent is king. If someone tricks you into signing, the deal's off. But on the other side, you have this deeply rooted idea of marriage as a sacrament, a holy bond that, according to tradition, can't just be undone by deception. The court had to figure out how to navigate this clash between modern law and ancient tradition. The husband's argument was, pretty direct and powerful. He basically said, my consent to this marriage doesn't count because it was based on a lie. In his eyes, he was tricked, plain and simple. So what was the secret? What was actually hidden? Well, the husband's legal team laid it all out. It wasn't just that the wife's first marriage was annulled over her mental state. She also had a documented history of psychiatric treatment. And they argued that her family knew all of this and deliberately kept it quiet. These weren't minor details. They were huge facts that he claimed would have completely changed his decision to get married in the first place. And this was the absolute core of the husband's case. He argued this wasn't just an oops, we forgot to mention it situation. No, this was an active, intentional effort to hide the truth to make sure the wedding happened. In a word, fraud. But of course, there are two sides to every story. The wife's legal team fired back with a defense that was all about tradition and the letter of the law. They essentially argued that the husband's entire case was built on a shaky foundation. Okay, so their defense pretty much had 4 key points. First, they said a Hindu marriage is a sacrament, so you can't just apply regular contract law about fraud to it. Second, they argued that legally they weren't required to disclose her medical history. Third, they kind of flipped it back on the husband, saying the responsibility was on him to do his research. And their final point was a clever one. They claimed there was no proof she was unwell at the exact time of this second marriage. So you've got two totally opposite arguments. The stage was set. All eyes were on the High Court, and specifically on Justice Doki Nandan. His ruling wasn't just going to decide the fate of this one couple. It was going to make waves and potentially change how marriage was understood in the eyes of the law in modern India. Now, before we get to the verdict, we have to understand this one key legal idea, material fact. It's not as complicated as it sounds. A fact is material if it's so important that a reasonable person probably would have made a different choice if they'd known about it. The whole case really boiled down to one question. Was the wife's hidden past a material fact? And in a truly groundbreaking ruling, Justice Nandan managed to connect these two different worlds. He didn't dismiss the sacred nature of Hindu marriage, but he made it crystal clear that even a sacred vow needs free and real consent to be valid. He basically said that tradition can't be used as an excuse for straight-up deception. And the verdict? An annulment. The court agreed with the husband. They found that his consent was, in fact, the result of fraud. But what exactly does an annulment mean? It's really important to know that it's not the same thing as a divorce. Okay, so here's the key difference. A divorce ends a marriage that was legally real. An annulment, on the other hand, says that a legally valid marriage never even existed. It's like it's erased from the record. So by granting an annulment, the court was sending a powerful message. The fraud was so serious that it made the marriage invalid from the very first day. So, why are we still talking about this case all these years later? Because its impact was huge, way beyond just this one couple. The ruling set legal precedents that are still important today, and it included one final twist that was frankly way ahead of its time. And just let that year sink in for a moment. 1982. We're talking more than 40 years ago. Keep that in your head, because it makes what the court decided, especially the final part about the wife's rights, all the more amazing. So, what were the big takeaways from this? Well, the ruling made a few things crystal clear. 1, consent is absolutely essential, even in a sacred marriage. 2, hiding a serious mental health history counts as fraud. 3, courts have the power to order their own medical exams to get to the truth. But it's that last point, that's where you see the real depth and compassion of this case. And here's the part that is just so remarkable. Even though he was essentially erasing the marriage from existence, Justice Nandan also upheld the wife's right to get financial support. He ruled that even though the marriage was annulled for fraud, you couldn't just strip a vulnerable person of their right to alimony. It was this incredible act of compassion that acknowledged that, in a way, she might have been a victim in this whole situation too, and it made sure she wasn't just cast aside with nothing. And that really leaves us with this final big question that this case brings up for all of us. It might be a legal case, but it touches on something we all deal with in our own lives. What do we owe the people we're with when it comes to being honest about our past? And where exactly do you draw that line between keeping something private and actively deceiving someone?